Good evening, Madam President. It is 6 p.m. I've started the recording.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mrs. Maida.
You have to unmute Miss Maida.
I seem to always have trouble with these things. Sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand or stay for a moment of silent meditation. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Miss Burton,
Here.
Miss Green,
Here.
Dr. Henderson,
Here.
Mr. Howard,
Here.
Mr. Levinstein,
Here.
Miss Maida,
Here.
Miss Beneo,
Here.
Mr. Stridiron,
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Here.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matter made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, the review and of programs and placement of students with disabilities, collective bargaining under the Taylor Law, CSCA, NTA, NASA, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Miss Burton,
Yes.
Miss Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Miss Maida,
Yes.
Miss Beneo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll return in approximately 1 hour.
Good evening, Madam President. The recording has started back up.
Good evening, everyone, and I apologize for our lateness. We had a lot to discuss. At this meeting, we have put the agenda, public comments on agenda items and non-agenda items together at the beginning of the meeting. So we're going to start with comments on agenda items. So please refer to the regulations regarding discussion and comments. Mr. McCoy, who do we have to speak on agenda items?
I will let them in the order they sent me an email, ma'am. The first person's name is Vanessa Misporos. Just give me 1 second to let her in.
Mr. McCoy, is this non-agenda or agenda items?
She signed up for non-agenda, ma'am.
Okay, anybody signed up for agenda items?
One, Mr. Ryan Lamar signed up for both.
Let's have Mr. Lamar come in on agenda items first, please.
All right, hold on 1 second.
Hello?
You're all set,
Yes,
Mr. Lamar?
Mr. Lamar.
Okay, all right, thank you. Brian Lamar, New Windsor, New York, taxpayer and parent of 2 Newburgh graduates and 1 NFA student. I have been writing emails, making phone calls, and presenting to the board for some time now. I've asked for ventilation upgrades in our buildings, which have yet to take place. Originally, despite the fact that the NECSD survey of the community for federal money expenditures said that the respondents wanted ventilation, $0 was entered into the American Rescue Plan application under that heading. I'm told this was changed, but not before I sent emails noticing. In the meantime, HEPA purifiers were not purchased or installed as an interim fix, and I was told windows were on order for NFA. It continues to perplex me that I have had no answer in all of this time for my inquiries. I've had to follow breadcrumbs and quiz my kid to find out if anything has happened. Yet, the Board of Education believed as late as May of 2021 that community relations for our senior staff were highly effective, as evidenced by the job evaluation that I foiled. I've asked repeatedly for a remote option. What we're doing now is just nonsensical. We now are giving the remote option to kids that are quarantining, whose parents would rather than be in the school building, and forcing the kids whose parents can do remote and want remote to come into the building. We have remote for kids that are suspended for breaking the code of conduct, but not for kids that want nothing more than to participate in school in a more safe manner. The entire district is waiting for phone calls every night. These have been my main asks. The high school is not staffed or managed correctly, and I suspect the capacity may be too high. We need more security there, clearly. Yet tonight we'll ask for $250,000 in cybersecurity, but I see no monies being moved from the general fund to cover actual security guard positions. We're building new buildings, but we haven't repaired the existing buildings and made them safe. Which leads me to the overall theme. I'm told time and again as a parent what I must do to make the schools safer. I should review the code of conduct. I should talk to my child. The kids are made to think that they themselves have some kind of agency with which to control the violence of others in their schools and the students who refuse to follow the rules. We've brought in all manner of consultants, blame the teachers, we blame the principals, but there's been no critical eye on the wheel of the car. We are in this state because of mismanagement. As we begin the search for a new superintendent, I think we need to review the issues with leadership. The most important part is honesty and authenticity. Whenever you are shutting down a democratic process, stifling debate, and trying to control a narrative, you are a poor leader. The public in the district has had to deal with very paranoid and manipulative leadership without transparency. The antidote to this is truth and total transparency. Next, we have ethics. I'm dismayed that in all of the debate and argument that has dominated this Board of Ed's meetings in the middle of the pandemic, you could not find one time to see fit as a unified board that is supposed to represent all of us to make a statement against sexual harassment. How is this possible? Tonight, I'm asking for specific policy language prior to the hiring of a new superintendent that addresses in a firm and lawful manner against sexual harassment, intimidation, and subordinate relationships for the people we taxpayers pay richly. This is education. And I'm asking that you immediately cease from trying to remove an elected Board of Education member. His term expires this year. The public put him there to represent us. If they want him gone, the public will not re-elect him. We need better leaders that can make decisions not because they're loyal to one another, but because it is the right thing to do. We need people willing to do the right thing. And to the public, I'm glad to see others expressing views tonight. But honestly, we need to all be more aware of what the Board of Ed is doing and what the people we are paying are doing, and become part of the debate and insistence on transparency that we will need to rebuild this school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, let's start on non-agenda items, please. The speakers for non-agenda items. You want to call them in order that they notified you?
So I got the first person, Mr. Edward Lawson. I'm in the room now. Mr. Lawson,
I'm sorry.
there you go.
Technical
Please,
issues.
your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Greetings and Happy New Year. My name is Edward Lawson Jr. I reside on Dogwood Lane in the town of Newburgh. I also serve as the co-chair of the Stewart Air National Guard Restoration Advisory Committee, now Restoration Advisory Board. I also serve as the president of FACES, Family and Community Engagement Services. And I serve also as a member of the PFAS multi-site health study on their community advisory panel. I'm not sharing that information to share my resume, but in a moment, I wanted to just share with you why. My hope tonight is to provide this board and this body with some key updates and information about the current state of affairs respecting the PFAS epidemic or environmental hazard that has impacted our community so richly. And also to request an opportunity to meet with this body and other central office administrators to discuss possible funding opportunities that are coming down as a result of this, to provide with some family and community engagement and co-curricular collaboration opportunities. That said, I wanted to just give everyone a brief sort of update or retrospective of where we are with respect to PFAS. Newburgh's once robust and viable water system, developed in the late 19th century, predating by almost 50 years the vaunted New York City water supply system, is now completely incapacitated by PFAS and PFOS contamination. And we do not know when we will be able to return to our system. And those PFAS and PFOA chemicals, also known as forever chemicals, are harmful pollutants that jeopardize our public health and our environment. And if exposed to these toxins, they're known to cause adverse health risk to people. The PFAS pollution is a public health emergency, and communities across the country are suffering devastating environmental, economic, and health effects of this dreaded disease. In the midst of the pandemic, you can imagine that this is even more exacerbated. No one should have to worry about toxic forever chemicals in their tap water. Everyone should be entitled to clean and healthy drinking water. However, the citizens of Newburgh have some of the highest levels of PFAS in their blood in the nation. Now we've learned what we've always feared, that the PFAS levels in our blood, in the Newburgh residents' blood, are now more than twice the national average. Only workers at the 3M plant in Dakota, Alabama, and people living next to the DuPont plant in Parkersburg, West Virginia, reported higher levels of PFAS in their blood. And so for those reasons, we're excited to partner with the University of Albany and the New York State Department of Health to better understand the environmental, economic, and health impacts of PFAS, they're going to be here doing and taking an important first step in confronting the systems that produce and perpetuate inequities and exposure to environmental pollutants like PFAS and PFOA, and their associated health risks to reduce environmental health inequities. The multi-site PFAS health study will begin in Newburgh next week. We are recruiting children and adults exposed to this contaminated drinking water. As I mentioned, the University of Albany, and specifically Dr. Erin Bell, who's the principal investigator in partnership with the New York State Department of Health, will be conducting this survey. But unlike previous surveys that were done, we want to focus on more than just PFAS. We want to focus on all of the environmental issues that are impacting this community. So in addition to PFAS, this study will take a look at metals like lead. It would also take a look at some of the other health impacts on communities like the city of Newburgh, diabetes and health, heart disease, etc. I would like to add, though, in a bit of good news, but I won't celebrate too excitedly. Newburgh, the Stewart Air National Guard Restoration Advisory Board that I sit on as I co-chair, along with Colonel Cook, we were one of the first, actually we were the first Air National Guard base to receive DERP funding. The DERP funding is the Defense Environmental Restoration Program funding. So our site, we are fortunate in that we will be getting remediation done. That process is over a period of years, maybe 2 to 3 years more. And we're in what they call the remediation.
Point of order, Madam President, the 5 minutes has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I'm sorry, we have to cut you off. Your 5 minutes is expired. Thank you, sir. Who's next, Mr. McCoy?
Next on the list in order would be Miss Vanessa Disporos. Let me let her in the room.
Thank you.
Looks like
Welcome.
there she is. Miss Disporos, your 5 minutes has started. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Vanessa Nisperos, and I'm a taxpayer and a parent of 2 NECSD students at Fostertown. I'm a social worker and have been a school administrator. As I wrote through the clerk, the Newburgh Enlarged City School District Board of Education has been operating in violation of the law. New York State boards of education bodies are required to post public meetings with ample time for the public to know about the meetings, with clear instructions on how to attend, participate, and comment. Even virtual meetings must meet this requirement. And in the notes that I sent through the clerk, I cited the case law that's listed in the school district obligations under the Open Meeting Law, Fact and Fiction by the New York State School Boards Association. This body has posted its meeting links on YouTube with comments turned off. There is no information posted on pages listing Board of Education information on how to join our input. And though the December 31st meeting was a special meeting in which it was decided by 6-3 to vote that former Superintendent Padilla would resign with 3-year severance, it was still required to uphold the notice provisions of the meeting law. On the website for Newburgh Enlarged City School District, there's a drop-down menu called Board of Ed, which includes the page for Board of Education members and information, a page on meetings, and a page on BOE agendas and minutes. It does not list how to register to participate, nor how to submit public comments ahead in writing or live during the meeting. Nowhere on any of these pages does it say how parents or the public can participate in an equal, fair, and transparent way. For this reason, the Newburgh Enlarged City School District Board of Education is operating outside of New York state law. Because this meeting process and notice is in violation of the law, I ask this body to please make the following changes. On the NECSD website, to provide the meeting date, a link to register, and instructions for submitting public comment be posted in a central and easily accessible area, and all 3 of the pages, Board of Education members and information, upcoming meetings, and board docs. That this be posted in clear and legible font in multiple languages, and that the posting of meetings and instructions for comments be shared at least 2 weeks prior to any meeting. Second, because this board is a duly elected body, elected by the public, it is unethical, immoral, and unacceptable that such a large allocation of the budget be given without notifying and soliciting input from the public. I am a parent with children in these schools, and it is outrageous that in a pandemic, no less, that resources be allocated as such. I ask that this body hold a special meeting for public input and comment on this particular budget allocation with enough time to allow for fair notification and participation. Third, I additionally ask that the board authorize Matthew McCoy, clerk of the board, to release the unredacted findings from the 2 investigations of Mr. Padilla to any parent or member of the public requesting it. This is in line with Freedom of Information Act requirements that only information that falls within one of 9 exempted categories be redacted. In this case, meaning the names and terms of employment. The submitted documents were comical in that they were fully redacted, completely blacked out with very few words legible. Additionally, I would like to request that this board cease taking action to remove Darren Stradern, who I do not know personally, but who is a person on the board who is speaking up and acting in integrity and the best interests of the parents of any CSD in the community. The children and students of Newburgh deserve better. They deserve your integrity, and they deserve your support in upholding the law and process throughout this time. I can be contacted with follow-up on this matter, and I will submit my comments in writing again through the clerk, and I ask that you take time to respond in a timely manner to these requests out of respect for parents in this district. Please act in integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, who's next?
Mr. Jeffrey Woody is next. Let me let him in the room, man. Please unmute your microphone, Mr. Woody. Your 5 minutes will begin.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the Board of Ed Board. My name is Jeffrey Woody, and I am a lifelong Newburgh resident as well as a retired NECSD administrator. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for remaining steadfast during these turbulent times, having to open the school year in the midst of a pandemic, while at the same time dealing with allegations against the superintendent of schools is no easy feat. I have learned over the years that no matter what the decision is, there will always be someone who is not in agreement. So as a board, you have to do what you have been charged to do, namely oversee the activities of the school system so students can have the best possible experience and outcome. Without the scholars, there would be no need for a local school district. As a reminder, the responsibilities of the board include maintaining governance standards, encouraging ongoing education, reviewing policies, evaluating policy implementation, reviewing budgeting and finance, managing the superintendent, and evaluating instruction and education. As per December's meeting, it is evident that you have managed the superintendent. An agreement was reached between both parties. Again, everyone may not agree with the way in which you managed him, but you did. It's been signed, sealed, and delivered. He is no longer the superintendent of any CSD with any power. I would like to suggest that you as a board focus on, in my opinion, more pressing matters that will make our community a better place. You might ask what matters. I'm glad that you asked. I'm talking about our scholars. As a district, we are performing overall below the state's levels. But where's the outcry? Where's the outrage? Where is the outrage on social media that would support improving the poor performance of our district? The administrators are aware, the teachers are aware. But where is the outrage? The outrage for the district to implement programs that would support our scholars in their learning experience. Where, I ask, is the outrage from the community? Parents, you should be demanding that your elementary school age children are given supports that will help them comprehend their lessons and not simply be passed on. Where is the outrage that would speak to the poor performance of our students of color? What tools are you giving them that would help them comprehend their lessons? Where is the outrage? these students should not have to struggle once they reach the secondary level. They have no foundation because they have been passed on. Too many of our high school students do not even have the foundation to support them on the secondary level. Even if there is learning going on, they don't have the foundation to build upon. How long are you going to continue socially promoting our scholars? Many of our students of color are passed on to the high school without successfully passing their core subjects from middle school. Where is the outrage? I keep asking, where is it? Education for our scholars in Newburgh must be reimagined, not patched, but recreated. And I guarantee you that when that happens, you will see a marked difference in the performance of our scholars on the secondary level. Who knows? Maybe even one day we'll even become a blue ribbon school district again, which simply means that the blue ribbons affirms the hard work of students, teachers, families, and communities in creating safe and welcoming schools where our students can master challenging and engaging content. Let's focus on our scholars. Thank you.
The next
Thank
person,
you.
the next person signed up to speak, ma'am, is Mr. Matthew Lawrence.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence, you can unmute your mic and your 5 minutes will begin. You gotta unmute, sir. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Can you
Okay,
hear me
there
now?
you go. Yeah. Go
A
ahead.
big thank you to the board. I know it's a thankless job and, you know, you guys are in the paper for the last year, it seems. So I thank you to all of you who do your job and do your job without the thanks that you should get. I don't think anybody could say it any better than Mr. Woody. The word transparency I see has been thrown around for the last 2 to 3 months. I've been a member of the district, graduate of 1989 at high school. My parents graduated high school. My grandparents graduated NFA. I have been involved in the announcing. I have been involved in pretty much many aspects of the district for the last 29 years. The transparency that everybody wants to see it's false. We as private citizens, we are electing you guys as a board member to represent us. I don't want to be privy to all of the executive sessions, to the fights, to the discussions, to all of that. I don't want to be privy to that. And I shouldn't be privy to that. I'm a private citizen. I elect you to do that job. If I want to be a part of that, then I have to run for it. I see people posting every single day that every meeting should be wide open. No, it shouldn't be. You guys need to do your job. The 9 of you need to do your job. Whether you agree with the way that you guys made the decision with the superintendent, that doesn't make any difference. You made the decision, we move on from it. If people don't like it, there's a way that they remove you or that there's a way that they keep you. Executive sessions are that. However, when I buy a clock, I want to see what time it is. I don't need the owner's manual unless something goes wrong. I think Newburgh lacks a little bit of that owner's manual. I do. I think the speaker before also made a good point that maybe we're not posting things the way we should. So every speaker that's come on here has made some great points so far. And what I'm trying to make here is that we elect you as a board member. You're an elected official. Once you accept that responsibility, you are not a private citizen anymore. Okay. I see all kinds of posts on social media posting as private citizens, tearing each other down. You are supposed to work collectively, the 9 of you. So whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 5, or all 9, it has to stop. I mean, the press loves us to begin with. Anything that happens in Newburgh makes front page. If it happens in another district, sometimes you don't even hear about it. The thing that I see that is lost on the 9 of you is the respect. I have sat back and watched this dumpster fire for the last year. I have no kids in the school district. I have none. But I watch this constantly, and it's a dumpster fire. It's the kind of accident that you can't drive by, that you have to look away, but you really don't want to look at it. We have for years overcome every possible situation you can as a school district, and we'll overcome this. We will. But you guys need to work together. Right now, I see people working separate from each other. There are lawsuits that are. We say we can't pay the board we can't pay the superintendent over $900,000, but there's a board member that has a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in court against the district. I read that 29-page document. If I didn't know those board members that are on that 29-page document, I would think you're the worst citizens in the world. It actually looked like an orchestrated plot out of a fiction book. I couldn't believe what I was reading. In closing, for me, we are mimicking what is going on in society right now, and we should be leading. We are teaching our kids that it's okay to fight. We are teaching our kids that it's okay to post anything we want without any retribution. We are teaching our kids, no matter what, just say it the way it is. And we shouldn't be. Sometimes you got to round the corners off a little bit to make it a little more palatable. I'm not saying hide anything at all. Put it out there. But if you have a specific question, mail it in. If it's not being answered, demand an answer. I mean, the last time I checked, the school board, you guys are right on Grant Street. If there's answers that you really want that bad, I'm sure you could show up or talk or email or get some sort of way to contact you. I know I can. But in closing, I just want to say, again, thank you for what you do. I know it's hard with what you do, but if you guys take anything out of the last 3 events, please learn some respect for each other and stop posting on social media. We don't want to read about it anymore. Thank you.
Mr. McCoy, who is our next person, please?
Next person in order to sign up is Miss Jill Jabor. Ms. Jabor, if you can unmute your mic, your 5 minutes will begin. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Jabor, you have to unmute your microphone.
My apologies.
Okay,
Good
yep.
evening. My
You're-
name is Jill DeBoer. I'm a parent, member of the community, and a taxpayer. Although I am sure the outrage and betrayal felt by the residents of Newburgh and New Windsor means little to nothing to the 6 members of the school board who chose to ignore the findings in which the former superintendent, who was found by your own admission guilty, you chose to neglect your duties and oath you each took to serve as leaders, representatives, and advocates for the community and district. You have violated your own policies and open meeting laws. I refer to one document under board docs, which this board adopted on January 14th, 2016. It was the duty of this board to appoint a citizens advisory committee, representatives which would have comprised of residents of the community, to meet with the board to provide advice and reactions about important matters before the board, which may significantly impact this community. This is a significant impact on the community, but the majority of this board have chosen to neglect their duties and oath and maintain their control. You may try and deny this, but we have seen through your masks of smiles and handshakes and portrait of working for the community and district, but rather your own needs for control. You have shown the community, the students, district employees, and teachers you have no regard for us. You have chosen to use your role for your own justice against those who speak out against you or the board. Speak out against you. Teachers and district staff have been told they are to say nothing and have no opinion. You have changed policies to try and oust board members who don't agree with you or vote your way. Well, I will refer to you the Whistleblowers Act and witness tampering laws. And to any board member who has felt threatened and bullied by others because you don't agree or want to vote differently, remember, you have the power to use your own voice. 1,800 people, which is more than any board member received during their election, would like to see 6 members of the board resign as soon as possible. But I am sure, based upon their actions and selfishness, that will not happen. So we will take our request to the Attorney General's office, Governor Hochul, and the New York State Commission of Education. A complaint has been drafted along with numerous violations presented as proof of your violations, and not just in policies, but as state and federal. If you do not succeed, if we don't succeed on state level, we will appeal with the U.S. Department of Education's commissioner. And if we fail, you can be assured, as each of you, your term will come to an end. And we will make sure to re-elect someone else who has the integrity and puts the needs of the community, the districts, the students, faculty, and staff first above themselves. I've heard so many comments tonight that I'm in support of, and so many that unfortunately I wasn't in support of. I've seen this district throughout the years put Padilla's needs before the students. The board, some gentleman just said, if you want to speak to the board, email them. I've emailed the board countless times. The board doesn't respond. They have nothing to say, just like they've chosen not to say anything to the media. Mr. McCoy has responded to me all but twice, presented me a completely redacted findings by both investigators, which I had to laugh at, but I submitted it to the U.S. Attorney Council, who I'm working with, just so that they can see the information and the fact that you're in violation of FOIL, because you can only redact identifying information, home addresses, telephone numbers. You can't redact an entire report to suit your own needs. I don't know what Padilla's contract stated, but he must have been really smart, because sexual harassment doesn't.
Point of order, Madam President, the 5 minutes has expired.
Thank you. Thank you. Who is our next speaker, Mr. McCoy? You have
The
some
next-
that have to be read?
Somebody submitted a comment. This comment was submitted by Ms. Sherry Netburn-Pavlov. It goes as follows. I do not condone sexual harassment at all, but I am an attorney. As an attorney, I took the time to read Appendix B to the agreement between the school district and Dr. Padilla. In addition to stating that the board received inconsistent conclusions from 2 separate independent investigations, it states several witnesses who were interviewed expressed their views that no wrongdoing occurred. It further states that it is undisputed that the allegations would not constitute the elements of a crime, and the allegations might not be sufficient grounds to set aside Dr. Padilla's employment contract. I agree that the cost of the agreement is high, but so would be the cost of a breach of contract arbitration or suit, and then an appeal, and the likely result would be a settlement, not just because it was a he said, she said situation, but also because of the independent witnesses. From where I sit as an attorney, the general public should stop second guessing the decisions that the board reached. Sexual assault allegations are difficult to evaluate and unfortunately costly whenever prosecuted or settled. Finally, the investigations are confidential for a reason, to protect those who participated and encouraged honesty. And there's one more comment that was submitted, ma'am.
Thank you.
This comment was submitted by Sarah Smith. Good afternoon. Please read this comment at tonight's board meeting. Good evening. I'm a mother of 2 girls in the Newburgh School District. I've recently submitted an email to all the members of the board in regards to the deal with ex-superintendent Padilla. I feel that it fell upon deaf ears and that this comment may as well. As a taxpayer and mother of 2 girls, I don't think saying that I'm upset with your recent decision conveys my true feelings. I'm disgusted. I watched the board meeting when the decision was made and applauded board member Darren Stridiron for speaking out against your decision to pay Padilla and for being the voice of the community. I laughed when Ms. Roberta Burton stated that she was worried about other members were tarnishing the board members' names. You tarnish your own name by voting to pay out a man who sexually harassed women. It is in my honest opinion that the members of this board may be a bit outdated and they are not acting in the community's best interest. I believe the kids would call you boomers, PhDs or not. I do not believe that Darren Straight Iron should be removed because you were upset that he had the gall to speak up and out against your decision. If you have him removed, you're making more of a mockery of yourselves and betraying the real individual morals on the board. Thank you.
Are there any more people that have signed up?
The only other person that signed up is Mr. Lamar, and that would be a non-agenda item now.
Okay, you want to let him in and see if he wants to speak on non-agenda items at this point?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say real quickly that I have on more than one occasion reached out to the board. I think I might have said it in my earlier comments, but that I do not get responses from the board. Mr. McCoy is great about getting back to me about anything that relates to his duties, but the board itself, I have never gotten a response from the board on anything. Occasionally things get sent to the superintendent's office and I receive responses from them, maybe, but never the board. Thank you.
That's everybody that signed up to speak tonight, man.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our board committees. We're going to start with curriculum and instruction. Mrs. Maida.
Thank you, Madam President. Curriculum and instruction met on January 5th. We discussed the resolutions that you see on the agenda this evening. And secondly, we went and discussed updates. First, our first update, excuse me, was about the Winter Academy, which was held during the holiday break. There were very positive feedbacks from parents and students, and we all agreed that we wanted to see more students participate in these future academies. Thank you also to all of the faculty and staff and who helped make this a success. Secondly, we discussed questions that we must ask to choose textbooks and course offerings, making sure our questioning and advice would be using a culturally responsive lens. And finally, we had an update. The last update was about the upcoming work with Dr. Hunter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our Exceptional Learners Committee. Mrs. Burton.
Evening, everybody. Exceptional Learners Committee, we met on January 11th, 2022. Oh, nope, that's today. We met on January 7th, 2022. Agenda items included one resolution for your consideration on tonight's agenda. We also received the monthly update on committees on preschool special ed, SPSP, which identifies and evaluates 3 and 4-year-olds, and also an update on our CSE Committee on Special Ed, which is responsible for students with disabilities age 5 through 21. Secondly, we received an overview explanation of the BEDS, Basic Education Data System. That's data through, all of our data through the end of December, which must be certified as of yesterday, January 10th, 2022. Let me see, it was discussed a few emerging trends that the school district is watching, such as new entrants, students coming in with IEPs, new entrants in grade 6 in high school, and also we need to be work more closely with curriculum instruction in terms of the overclassifying of students, particularly students of color, Black boys, which should not be overrepresented in special ed at this juncture in our educational trajectory. We also, the Division of Exceptional Learners is also working closely with curriculum instruction to ensure that the our AIS academic intervention services and RTI response to intervention addresses the gaps. And so because of, COVID, both AIS and RTI have been interrupted. Let's see. Also, we heard an update. We received an update on out-of-district students. We have about 240 students that are out of district. The partnering schools are currently operating with virtual, remote, and instructional platforms. However, staffing and programs are challenged by COVID, and everyone across the state are in pretty much the same situation as we are. And lastly, of course, COVID, Omicron continues to be a game changer, resulting in unprecedented challenges to both adults, students, those who are positive, tested positive and exposed. So I just want to thank everyone, and I want to thank the team at Exceptional Learners and Student Support Services for your continued intentional focus on our scholars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. We're going to move on to our Audit and Finance Committee. Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So Audit and Finance met at 5 p.m. today. We discussed the 8 resolutions that are on tonight's finance agenda. And in addition, we discussed the district's corrective action plan update, a special transportation bid, obsolete tech equipment, and a donation of hardware. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to the board president section, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. David Shaw, and he's going to talk about or begin to talk about the superintendent search.
Thank you, Madam President and board members and the public. So the board president asked me to describe what happens in a contemporary setting with respect to the process of searching for new superintendent. And what's most common among school districts now, and we represent many in the region, would be to undertake an RFP process to elicit responses from search firms. Also, BOCEs do search processes, and to have the Board of Education conduct interviews of search consultants and arrive at a selection. It would be very rare today to have a board conduct a search on its own. It has happened, but it is atypical at this point in time. The board would have some important decisions to make in terms of community engagement in the process of searching for a superintendent. And the search consultants who you may be engaging will have recommendations with respect to that. And there can also be discussions at the board level at your meetings with respect to your views on how to engage all of the constituent groups, the public, staff members, etc. There's important timing to a superintendent search. Typically, it would result in an appointment in July or in August. So if you are going to seriously entertain conducting a search towards that time frame, now is really the time to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Board members, anybody have any questions or comments on the superintendent search? Yes, Mr. Stradone.
Thank you, Madam President. So I think we've learned a lesson as far as what needs to get done as far as whoever comes in as a new superintendent, that the contract must be reviewed by so many people at this point, so as not to include parts in there that basically make it impossible to have a superintendent removed for any kind of immoral acts. So is that something that can be done, or are these contracts, this is the way it's written in New York State, or is it only that this contract that was the last one we had what was the process for that? And, you know, I always want to make sure we don't have the same situation as we had with the last one.
Okay, it is pretty typical to have a superintendent's contract that's aligned with what New York State School Boards recommends. Superintendent candidates usually are represented by the statewide superintendents associations councils, and there's the negotiations regarding key provisions. Part of your search process could include coming up with a model contract and seeing whether or not your selected candidate would agree to your terms. So that's really an issue of when you're down to your finalist, how is it going to be negotiated? What will that person demand? Will you say, okay, are you willing to walk away from a candidate if the candidate isn't going to meet your terms? So there are many dynamics, and having a review process is great, and input is great. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to a negotiations.
Thank you. Mr. Stronach, I see your hand again.
Yeah, thank you. As a follow-up to that, so based on what Mr. Shaw said, I think it would be great to have the board come up with the model contract, you know, the contract that would be shown to all prospective superintendents that we as a Newburgh community could live with, not just as a board, but the community could live with, so we don't get in the same position that we were before. We can't have a situation where the contract is so amenable to the superintendent that it makes it so difficult to act in the proper way. And then as a follow-up to that, how, you know, it's a tricky situation, but how difficult is it going to be as a district to attract a superintendent when the school board, school district officials, and anyone associated with the agreement is under criminal investigation? How does that affect the process?
Mr. Shaw, can you help us with that?
Yes, the investigation that is ongoing now is at its infancy, and there are no indictments of board members, and whether or not there ever will be is questionable. The DA really has to do his job and make his decisions. And in the meantime, the search process would be in its infancy right now. And one would certainly hope that the DA's activities will resolve relatively soon. And by the time the selection process would be ready, that the air would be cleared and the board and the superintendent candidate could consummate an agreement.
Board members, any other questions or comments from Mr. Shaw? Thank you. Yes, Mr. Stronach, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I know at the last meeting, I said I was going to add an item to the end of the agenda, but with everything that went on, I forgot. So I would like to add an item to the agenda that deals with the two investigative reports and making them public, but redacting the names of the victims, the witnesses. You know, I think that would be the only thing that would be redacted. So that's my item that I would like to add to the agenda tonight.
So can you make a motion to add an item, please?
I make a motion to add to make public the two investigative reports dealing with Dr. Badia, where the names of the victims and the witnesses are redacted. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw, can we do that?
I'd like an opportunity to Well, you could do it, certainly if you had unanimous consent to add it to the agenda. But if it gets to that point where it would be added to the agenda for a vote, I'd like an opportunity to speak to the board in executive session to give legal advice ahead of any voting.
Okay, so before we do that, I need a second, and then I'll get to you, Mrs. Burton.
I'll second.
Okay. So Mr. McCoy, help me here. Do we do questions or discussion, or do we do a vote to add? What do I do?
There's a motion and a second on the floor, ma'am. Now you would be at the discussion to add on the agenda.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton, do you have a question on adding this item?
I have a question. Because both Dr. Padilla, which everyone knows, because his name is all over the place in regards to this report, and the other people involved, it had been a personnel matter. Is it possible that if his name is in public, that everyone's names should be in public?
Mr. Shaw?
I don't like the idea of just everyone else's names are left, but his name is plastered all over the, the paperwork.
Mr. Shaw, can you help us?
I would, not really. I would really like to give legal advice regarding this whole concept, which is troublesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so anybody else have any questions or comments? So let's vote on adding this to the agenda. Mr. McCoy?
Ms. Burton,
No.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Levinstein,
No.
Ms. Maida,
No.
Ms. Beneo,
No.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker. No. That item fails, ma'am.
Thank you. We're going to move on with the agenda. We're going to go to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Secondary, Mrs. Soto.
Thank you and good evening, Madam President. Our division presents to you agenda items 5.1 through 5.4 for the board's consideration and consent.
Would any member like to separate out any item? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Beneo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Soto. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Exceptional Learners has one item for this evening for the board's consideration, recommendations from the CSE and CPC committees.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Beneo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
The Division of Finance presents items 7.1 through 7.8 as a consent agenda for the board's consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I see your hand, Mr. Stridiron.
Yes, Madam President. Item 7.4, please.
Any other items to separate out? I'd like to entertain a motion on items 7.1 through 7.8 without 7.4.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion on these items? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So I saw the contract and I see that there are 10 security guards from the private security company being hired from December of 2021 to June of 2022.
Is that item 7.4, Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Okay, so hang on to your question.
Oh,
Let's
I'm
vote
sorry.
on everything else and then we'll get back to you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. So let's anybody else have any questions or discussion on the other items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Let's move to item 7.4, please. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I see your questions or discussion. I see your hand, Mr. Stridiron. Now you ask.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So yes, the contract states from December 2021 to June 2022 that there'd be 10 security guards per day at the, I would assume, the high schools and maybe the middle schools. These would be private security guards from that company. Why would we need to hire someone from a private company at this point? It's been, I believe it's been over a month. Have we not been able to secure security guards through the regular HR process, hiring through CSEA?
Dr. Spindler, would you like to address that? You did a nice job with this in Finance Committee, so thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you for this opportunity. We did put a posting out, Mr. Stridiron, through HR for part-time workers and for substitutes, and we had 0 responses. I did indicate this to you in a Board of Ed Weekly, and I can resend that information to you if you fail to read that. My other thing is we have executed the contract up to $20,000 when we were in that great need. We also brought to HR to take the 8 part-time positions and make them full-time because we saw that there was interest from the community and from potential employees to want full-time positions. So we took the 8 part-time positions and we made them full-time positions to attract more candidates. And we were able to do that. So from this $35,000 contract, we have already expended $20,000. But since it's more than $20,000, we're bringing it to the board to give us some cushion. Unfortunately, with COVID, we've had a lot of people having to take off because of COVID-related illnesses and then other related illnesses, giving us more than 10 absences a day. So this just gives us a security from now until the end of June. If we needed to add someone because we have exhausted our list and someone is not coming, is not able to service the school, we don't want to close the school down unnecessarily for lack of staff. So like I said, we have not used the Snoop investigators services this week because we were staffed, because we had some school buildings that were virtual, allowing us to reallocate staff. So this is just like an emergency opportunity for us to be able to secure staff so that we wouldn't have to close buildings down. And we've only utilized them at our NFA main campus. And it was up to 10 that we could use, but we've on average only used about 2 to 4 on the days that we needed them. I hope that answered all your questions.
Mr. Stridiron, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. It puts a little bit more perspective on it. But what would prevent us from hiring private companies to do food service or other tasks within the school if we have a short list of people that are coming in because of either sickness or we can't find people to be hired for those jobs? is there like a, is this it's a one-time thing? Because once we start hiring private companies to come and do the work for people that have been doing the work for many, many years, it's going to be more enticing for the district to start doing private work for teaching or other positions in the school. So I'm concerned that, COVID has a lot of excuses. COVID is, every reason why something goes wrong is COVID. So hoping that this is just a temporary thing and that, we can get through this and not go down a road that we don't want to go. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on item 7.4? If not, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Miss Maida,
Yes.
Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton. Miss Burton,
Yes.
Miss Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. Mr. Howard, you have your hand up.
Yes, Madam President. So just for clarification, this is not a creep or a walk down the hill to interfering with unit work of our unions, correct? That is specifically what Dr. Spindler explained, correct?
Dr. Spindler, yes, I
Yes.
agree.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So Dr. Spindler, that's the end of your items. Thank you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. Macklemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.13 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Mr. Howard, do you have your hand up for that? No. Okay. How about you, Mr. Stridiron?
Yes, 8.3, please.
8.3. Anybody else want to separate out anything else? I'd like to entertain a motion on all those items except for 8.3.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Miss Maida,
Yes.
Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton,
Yes.
Miss Green,
Yeah.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Let's move on to item 8.3. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? I see no questions. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton,
Yes.
Miss Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Miss Maida.
Yes.
Madam President, I'd like to request permission to add 2 items.
Let's take one at a time, Mr. McEnroe. Let's do the first one. Can
Thank
you
you, Madam
read the
President.
resolution, please?
Be it resolved that in accordance with the provisions of Education Law 3020A 4B, the Board of Education hereby implements the penalty of a 75-day suspension without pay. In addition to the completion of a course on classroom management strategies and techniques as a remedial measure for employee number 06222 1-2 in accordance with the hearing officer's decision in SED case number 36984, dated January 8th, 2022.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on adding? Roll call to add.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes. Now I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
No.
May I read the
Okay.
next one, Madam
Yes,
President?
please, Mr. McLemore.
Be it resolved that the interim superintendent is hereby authorized to direct a comprehensive medical examination and evaluation, including psychiatric and/or psychological examination and evaluation, if necessary, of employee number 11122 in accordance with the provisions of Section 913 of the Education Law. And be it further resolved that the board hereby directs that employee number 11122 submit their medical records, if any, to the extent and for the time as determined by the examining physicians to the board designated examining physicians at or before such examination/evaluation.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on adding? Roll call to add.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green, Ms. Green,
What? Yes.
thank you. Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
This is, I need a second.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Green. You muted, Ms. Green.
No, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Henderson,
I need another moment to vote. I'm sorry.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
No.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. And as we close this section, I want to thank Dr. Spindler and wish her all success in her new position. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support.
We're going to move on to our clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from December 14th, December 21st, and December 31st, 2021.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Hello,
So moved.
thank you.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Liven it up. Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Miss Maida.
Yes.
Miss Mineo.
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Miss Burton.
Yes,
Miss Green.
Yeah.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Miss Maida.
Yes.
Miss Mineo.
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Miss Burton.
yes.
Miss Green.
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.